Today, I want to talk to you about a silent habit that may be frying your nervous system without you even realizing it. Now, if you're watching this, you have concerns about your nervous system, and you've probably tried a lot of different things. And that's how you kind of know that maybe it's something you're overlooking. And I did this for many years. I tried so many things. I was taking supplements to support my nervous system. I'm meditating, I'm doing yoga nidra. I'm trying different food sources, juicing, I'm eliminating other foods. I'm working on my mindset, I'm looking at my stress. All of that's great. Highly recommend all of that. But what do you do when you've done all that? You've spent money on supplements, you've seen alternative practitioners, you've done yoga, meditation, massage, all of that, and your nervous system still feels fried. That was me. And I did the mind work. I felt confident. Um, my inner self talk was great. And I still felt a little fried, and I couldn't figure out why I still had this just inner angst, that feeling that something was not quite right. And then I've heard clients say the same thing. Tiffany, why don't I ever feel safe? Well, let's talk about it. Okay. So I discovered over time in myself, because I actually went to my functional medicine practitioner and she said, Tiffany, my God, your cortisol levels are really high. You must be having anxiety, perhaps panic. I said, no, actually, I'm really happy. And I had become so busy that I was no longer attuned to those subtle shifts in my physiology that were an indication or an early warning sign to me something's not quite right. See, I had health anxiety in the past. And so I had become so used to focusing on every symptom, every subtle shift in my body that it had become pathological. Well, then I trained myself to have a positive mindset about my health. And I really had rebuilt good health in many aspects of my life. And so now I did the opposite. I got so busy living life that I forgot to pay attention to the loving messages that my body was sending me that, hey, Tiffany, something isn't right. But when I started to pay attention, and it was honestly because of the high cortisol test, I began to notice I didn't feel really peaceful. I did have this weird inner feeling something's not quite right, this discomfort in my body, these subtle signals. And that's when I made the discovery based on my own research and then subsequently working with clients that there's often these small, subtle little things we're doing that are literally frying our nervous system because together they're cumulative. So let's talk about that because I don't want this for you. I want you to be aware of these things because they're pretty simple to eliminate on many fronts. So, what are these hidden habits? So, the first hidden habit is background noise, living a life with a constant din of background noise. Now, why is this a problem? Maybe you like doing your dishes and listening to music or having a movie playing in the background. The reason it's a problem is because your brain needs to rest. It actually needs silence. It needs time to process without constantly having input. So when you have music, TV, audiobooks, podcasts playing constantly in the background, your mind isn't getting that time to rest, and it's a constant stimulation to your nervous system. Also, multitasking. We've talked about this before, and I'm going to say it again. Multitasking is highly detrimental to your brain. And nobody really actually multitasks. You task shift, and task shifting over and over again at a rapid pace through the day is highly stressful, and new research is showing actually might be damaging to your brain. So think about how often are you task switching? Now, some of you have jobs that require task shifting. Are you spending time mitigating that? Shut off the emails, set a scheduled time for checking emails, for checking your phone, for doing these things, and set aside a focused work time to just focus on that one task and get it done. Scrolling. When we are scrolling on our phone, this motion, this action, we're actually stimulating our brain in an extremely stressful way. So I want you to ask yourself, how much time do I spend looking at social media, looking at content that requires me to scroll? The new research coming out is that this is highly disruptive to the nervous system. And the big one that I was overlooking in my life, I was honestly aware of all these other things I've just mentioned, but there was one that I wasn't aware of, and it was rushing and rushing through life super busy. Now, this is, I think, just an American pastime. Most of us wake up probably too early, probably haven't gotten enough sleep. And I'm not even going to go into sleep. Everyone listening to my channel should know how important that is. That if you do not sleep well or sleep enough, it's the first thing you should be addressing and taking care of and straightening out, because that is the ultimate foundation of your nervous system health is rest. But even if you sleep well and then you hit the floor running in the morning and you're rushing throughout the day, you've got a to-do list, you're checking it off, you're getting stressed out if anything interrupts your plan for the day. If you get off schedule, you're getting upset. You have no white space in your schedule. So if the slightest thing happens, you're risking being late, not getting stuff done. You're always pushing, yelling at your kids to hurry up, always feeling like you're running behind, not getting enough done. You should have done this, you should have done that. Massive stressor. So these are the hidden things, but rushing is the big hidden trigger that aggravates the nervous system. And that is what I discovered was the hidden reason behind why, even after I beat my nervous system related health problems like chronic fatigue syndrome and eczema and food allergies and irritable bowel and all this stuff I was dealing with, I was still having high cortisol levels. It was why, even though I was no longer panicking and I didn't have any anxiety, still high cortisol levels. Now, here's the weird thing, my cortisol levels were actually lower when I had anxiety and panic than they were when I was free of that and I was rushing all the time. When you are rushing, you are training your subconscious mind that basically you're in a state of emergency. Remember, your subconscious mind isn't logical and rational like your frontal cortex, like the logical part of your brain. And so it doesn't understand that there's no real emergency. It doesn't understand the difference between you being pursued by a rabid dog and you rushing to complete a project for your boss. So organize your time, organize your day to mitigate that rushing. So, what is the antidote to all these things? Okay. What is the antidote to all of this din and background noise, this constant stimulus, this pressure, this rushing? You're going to hate me, but it's boredom. Boredom is the antidote to everything we've talked about. Silence and boredom, okay? Because if you think about it, our ancestors didn't have this constant stimuli. You were not designed, you have not adapted to the constant stimuli of modernity. And sorry to say that we have to take extra measures to mitigate against that. You need freedom. Your brain needs freedom to process, to think, to store memories. And if you've been wondering, why is my memory so bad? I hear this constantly from clients. I can't focus. My memory's terrible. I'm worried I have early onset dementia or Alzheimer's, and I was worried about that too. When I began to ameliorate some of these things in my life, guess what returned to me? My memory, my ability to focus. And all of that can return to you as well. So, what happens in silence is your nervous system begins to downshift. your body begins to relax. You begin to shift into parasympathetic rest and restore mode. Your mind can now process emotions. This is super important. If we're so busy, so rushed that we don't take the time to process emotions as they arise, we just push them away, then that emotional reservoir begins to build and build and build. And then you get slightly off schedule, or some little trigger happens and you explode in a rage. Um, this is a sign that long ago you were not including those times of emotional release. You need silence, you need quiet, you need lack of stimuli to do that. And also, when you have those times of silence and, yes, actual boredom, that's when your creativity flows. If you're stuffing your brain literally with information, knowledge, noise, your brain doesn't have time to create. Have you ever noticed it's those down times when those creative juices flow? For example, like when you are in the shower, or you're laying there in bed, or you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and ping, you suddenly get that fabulous idea, and you've solved a problem that's been churning in your brain for a long time. It's because you were silent. You weren't thinking about anything else. Your mind was just free to process. You need those times. And when you have those silence times, your brain is being trained to focus because it's not constantly being inundated with so many different things all at once. This is overwhelming to our brains. So I really encourage you to really take this to heart, because for me, it made the difference between having constant levels of high cortisol, which would have likely, I would have paid for down the road. And if this is how you're living with this constant stimulation, it's not good for your health, mental, social, spiritual, physical. It can affect you on many fronts, and it's really worth paying attention to. Well, I thought I'd be able to finish this video that I was making for you yesterday, but I had to come back to it because I'm trying to live in balance, and sometimes there are little interruptions to my life and I need to honor those. But I wanted to finish this video now, but that will help you understand the change of clothes and appearance. So I want to jump back into those habits of being overstimulated, too busy, rushing, that keep our nervous system on high alert and keep us in an unhealthy nervous system state. And these are the subtle things that often go unnoticed in our lives. And I want to talk to you now about silence. I want to talk to you about what happens when you don't have those planned times of silence. We didn't need to plan this 500 years ago. I'm always talking about 500 years ago, right? But sometimes I kind of wish I lived back there. And I know some of you do too, because you've expressed that to me. At least I'd like to keep the simple parts of that life. Maybe some of the hardships I'd like to get rid of. But what happens when we don't plan that silence? Because even though we didn't need to plan it back then, life is so busy, so complex in our modern society. We actually have to be proactive to make sure we're having these times of silence. And yes, I said it, boredom. Boredom. Now, when you start getting used to those times of silence, you actually find that you start to enjoy them. That boredom that comes about because your brain is used to being constantly overstimulated now begins to settle, it begins to wane, and you find you just enjoy quiet and silence. Now, what happens if we don't plan this in? Okay. If we don't plan it in today's society, unless you happen to be retired and relaxing a good deal of your day, you're going to find that you are living in a world of constant overstimulation. Even if you're used to it and you don't readily recognize it, your nervous system does. And I told you my story about how I was rushing all the time and ended up with excessively high cortisol levels, despite the fact that I wasn't actively experiencing anxiety and panic. And in addition to overstimulation, that continual, perpetual overstimulation is going to lead to fatigue. And I've had many clients, friends, and I've experienced myself say, I don't understand why I'm so tired all the time. I'm getting the 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I'm not working too many hours, but yet I'm tired all the time because your brain has not adapted to deal with this constant noise and overstimulation. It needs moments of quiet. Have you ever noticed how you could go out and work in your garden or walk all day in the park or take your kids to amusement park or go to an event and hours later you still have energy? But sit in front of your computer, go through emails, scrolling on your phone, and it just literally drains you. It's mental fatigue. And I think we all know that mental fatigue can be even more draining than an extensive time of physical activity. At least it is for me. Maybe it's not that way for everybody. Also, our focus begins to wane because this constant overstimulation is drawing your attention away from the present moment, from what you're doing, and it's stealing your focus. So, one of the things I've noticed is how many clients come into me and say, I have focus problems. I have memory problems. I think I have ADHD. I think I have some sort of neurological problem. Before you diagnose yourself with some sort of neurological problem, take a look at how often you're living in a state of overstimulation with a constant noise, the drone of constant media input, information input, things in the background of your life, and just sit in silence on a day to day basis and then see if you still have trouble focusing. And I'm going to bet most of you will not. um, Also, when you allow yourself to be perpetually overstimulated, you actually don't form memories appropriately. So, all these things around you are stealing your present moment peace. All of this overstimulation and input that you're allowing in your life is distracting you from the present moment. And then you find out at the end of the month that as you look back over your previous month, perhaps your previous year, you can't remember things. You can't remember the details of the times you spent with your children, your spouse, your partner, your friends, because your memories are not forming properly when you're living in that state of overstimulation. So, this is how vital this is. It doesn't only rob us of the present moment, but it robs us in the future because thinking about those fond memories of times we have spent doing things we love and spending time with people we enjoy, that's one of the greatest pleasures of life. And it's being stolen from us if we do not mitigate against the complexity and overstimulation of modernity. So, and finally, it can affect your sleep. That constant overstimulation can drive your cortisol up so that when it's time to go to sleep at night, your brain is used to going 100 miles an hour and it has trouble to slowing down. And then this can compound over time and actually result in you developing stress related physical problems. I see it over and over again. I've experienced it myself. You've probably experienced it. I see it all the time in clients: hormonal disruption, headaches, strange physical pains, muscle tightness, gut issues is a huge one. So, how do we go about dealing with this? Okay. First of all, there's no use feeling guilty. While I'm telling you all about this, I'm pointing you to your personal responsibility. I don't want you to think, "Oh my god, such a loser. I'm doing this to myself." We've never experienced this throughout all human history, so it's hard to know what to do. And I would recommend that you begin today. Make a commitment today that I'm going to do one small thing differently to just give my nervous system and my brain the ability to rest. So, the first thing, try driving in silence. I know that it'll be difficult at first, trust me, because I do it and I'm like, oh, this just feels so wrong. But you'll get used to it. Your brain will be free to create, to think, to solve problems, and just to relax. Try a 5 minute meditation. Now, why 5 minutes? Not 20, not 30, because your brain's not used to it. This is why we try to meditate. We get so frustrated. We think, I can't think about my breath for more than 2 minutes. 20 minutes, that's too long. Try 5. Try actively meditating. I have a whole video on active meditation. It's when you use your 5 senses: vision, auditory, tactile, your inner emotional sense, and you really cue into the present moment and what you're doing now. You don't have to sit still and focus on your breath. There's no magic there. You can focus on what you're doing now. Try it for 2 minutes, just focusing on the present moment, and then maybe 3, and then 5, and you'll find that you are rewiring your brain. Your brain is neuroplastic. So while I've been telling you a lot of bad news about how rough it is to keep our brains and our nervous systems healthy in this modern society, we're not powerless. Our brains are adaptable, neuroplastic. They can rewire, but we have to actively take responsibility for that. Journal, okay? Spend some time journaling, just letting a free flow of idea. I'm not necessarily talking about journaling about negative feelings, journaling about emotions, just journal. Journal about the present moment, what you're thinking, feeling, experience. Think about a problem in your life and strategize. I call that the strategy journal. Because if you never slow down long enough to consider your problems and you're always pushing away emotion, you're always pushing away your problems, your brain will create often a looping thought pattern where the anxiety or fear just keeps reemerging and reemerging because you're never taking time to solve it. Looping thoughts are often your brain's attempt to get you to solve a problem. Now, sometimes they're irrational, and I deal with that a lot in my clients, and there's ways to subconsciously mitigate that. But a lot of times it's just there's a relationship problem between you and your spouse. There's an issue with one of your kids, and your brain keeps bringing it up because it wants you to solve it. Set aside some quiet, silent, peaceful time to think about it and brainstorm solutions. And then your brain knows that you're serious about solving this problem and it won't need to keep looping it back over and over again. And then my favorite, spend time in nature, in the sunshine, even in the winter time, just take a walk in the cool, crisp air. Feel the sunshine or the breeze on your skin. Use your 5 senses to really enjoy that present moment. Listen to the birds. Feel as you walk across the ground barefoot, if possible, to get some of that healing energy from the earth. Read. This is becoming a lost art. We're so overstimulated that many of us have lost the ability to concentrate on text. Have you noticed that? I know I can't be the only one that's experienced it where you've been so busy for maybe a year, you really haven't read a lot, and then you pick up a book that someone tells you about and you sit down and try to read and you think, I can't concentrate on this. Like your mind is being diverted off in another direction, and you constantly find yourself having to refocus and reread. And you think, what happened to me? You begin to ponder whether maybe you're suffering from early onset cognitive issues. I thought this, but I found out when I sat in silence, when I put away my phone, when I stopped scrolling, and I dedicated 3 months to just the practice of letting my brain rest, I could read whatever I wanted again. I could concentrate once again. So put the phone away, put aside the stimulation, take these social media apps off your phone, and just have this time to connect. And then finally, is single task. Just say, okay, right now I'm going to cook dinner. I'm not going to watch a movie while I'm cooking dinner. I'm not going to call Fred while I'm cooking dinner. I'm just going to cook dinner. I'm going to enjoy the process and really focus and concentrate. You're retraining your brain towards focus, towards peace, towards single tasking, towards memory consolidation. All of these good things happen. Your brain is not adapted to the complexity of modern life. Maybe some people have brains that adapt better. I'm not one of them. Okay. I live a peaceful, happy life, but I have to take care of this brain just like I take care of myself emotionally and physically. Okay. Now, when you first start to do this, I'm going to warn you, you are going to feel incredibly uncomfortable. I want you to embrace the suck. Embrace the discomfort. Just like anything that is worth doing, whether it's things like cold plunging or exercise or eating asparagus or things you don't like, you can make yourself do these things because you know it's good for you. Expect to be in a little discomfort. And here's what you got to be careful. You remember I've talked about in other videos those three phases that we say that sabotage our attempts to change our lives. I can't stand it. Oh my God, I can't take it. I can't handle it. Okay. When you tell yourself that, you're going to end up reaching for your phone. You're going to end up turning on the TV. It's going to be tough at first for some of you, but that's okay. Embrace that discomfort. Start with 5 minutes, then 10, and then 15. And then you can do this. You're going to notice in a short time that you are feeling so much more peaceful, so much more centered, your nervous system calm. This will enable you to think about the issues in your life and solve them, to empty that emotional reservoir, to calm the nervous system. Bring yourself back into that state, that parasympathetic state of rest and restore, so you will sleep better and you'll have better health. I have been able to bring about so much of this in my own life, and it has been a brilliant and wonderful reward, and I want the same for you.